On today's ChurchTechCast Q&A, web hosting, the order of service, and is the Mac Pro really worth it? Hi everyone, and welcome again to another episode of the ChurchTechCast Q&A show. My name is Paul Allen Clifford, and I'm your host today, and I'd love for you to send me your questions so that I can answer them. So head on over to trinitydigitalmedia.com/contact, where you'll find all my contact information. If you just want to leave your question there, perfectly fine. If instead you're more of an email person, just drop me a line, paul@trinitydigitalmedia.com. If you're more of a telephone person, 1-877-POD-ECHO, 1-877-763-3246. Or if you're more of a Twitter person, I got you covered too. Head over to twitter.com/Paul Allen Cliff, PaulAlanclif, and you can interact with me there. Give me a mention, DM, what have you. Any of those are perfectly acceptable ways to get a hold of me and ask your questions. Or you can do what most of these people did, which is frequent some of the groups that I frequent, and then we can go from there. So let's start off with some of these questions, shall we? Jason Carson on the Church Tech Google Plus group asks, I know there has been a lot of discussion on here about websites and hosting and such. I have recently moved to another church and I would really like to completely revamp our website. Currently it is powered by Ezekiel and I don't like this avenue at all. At my previous church we had a registered domain with GoDaddy, which I wasn't fond of, used a local for hosting and built the site with WordPress. I would like to go with WordPress at my new church, but I don't have any ideas for domains or hosting. Does anyone have recommendation? I've looked at Bluehost, but I wondered if there were others. The majority of storage we would require would be pictures from posts. Okay. Any videos would be uploaded to YouTube and linked. If we go with sermon audio in the future, I'm thinking we link to a streaming service like Soundcloud. Thanks for any help. Okay, Jason. The first thing that I recommend to any church that's at all interested in doing this is that they take a look at Dreamhost, because Dreamhost offers free hosting for 501c3 corporations in the U.S. So churches tend to be nonprofits, so they tend to get this free hosting. So that seems like a no-brainer. Now, if you're Willow Creek Church, if you're Saddleback Church, if you're Life Church, if you're a huge church, this is not going to work for you. It might work for like a pastor's blog, or it might work as just a smaller site, but it's shared hosting, so if you're going to get really beat by bandwidth and traffic, it won't work. But Dreamhost is a great way to do it. Personally, I use WestHost. The reason I use WestHost is because their customer service was so great. Every question I asked before I pulled the trigger, they answered, and they were always getting back with me. They were willing to work with me on the price and a bunch of stuff like that that just sold me on them as a service. So those are the two that I can recommend. And I understand what you mean about Ezekiel and some of the others. What I don't understand really is I don't understand why people read these questions and they don't answer them. But that's neither here nor there, as the guy I used to work with would say. So let's move on before I launch into a rant, which would be probably not good. Okay. Joe Salino in general discussion, again in the Church Tech group in Google Plus, said, How important is the order of service? I've been testing new presentation software and it's given me some ideas for using countdown clocks, mini movies, and the like. My objective is to enhance worship with these types of presentations. How do you do it? Can you give me some ideas for your order of the service? Yeah, no problem, Joe. So, what we do is we typically have a countdown clock that goes before the service. Then and the countdown clock goes over slides that are auto advancing. So that goes before the service. Then when it reaches 0, we will either start out with a creative element. So sometimes a performed song, sometimes a video, sometimes even the announcement video, any of those things. Then we'll head into worship. After worship, we'll often have either a drama or a story or a creative video element. Then we might throw the announcements in there, or it might be before this, after worship, either way. Then we tend to do either a worship song or a performed song, which isn't worship so much, but tends to illuminate what we're talking about in the service. So all those are put together so that it's an entire whole. The whole thing is a package. We don't put it together in a way where it's like piecemeal. Hey, there's a little bit of this, that. It needs to all flow together. Sometimes we even build the thing so that a song leads into a drama, leads into a video, or in some other order. We've even done, you play a song and then halfway through there's a lull in the song where the band just plays and someone gives their story. So any of those things are absolutely possible and I'd highly recommend it, but don't do it yourself. Make sure that you have approval for the pastor, make sure you get some creative people on a team. This is really a bigger deal than, oh, I just learned I can do this, so I'm going to throw it in without telling anybody. Yeah, don't do it that way. You need to expand from there. And if you have more questions, don't hesitate to ask. One of the things that I do is creativity in the church. So, okay, Ben Salzman on Church Tech Leaders asks, new Mac Pro or no? I'm due for a new computer at my church. Is it worth it to make a jump to a Mac Pro? Currently, I have a 2010 MacBook Pro, and I run it into a 27-inch cinema display. Obviously, the MacBook Pro is terribly slow at this point. So here's my question. Is the current Mac Pro worth it over, say, a 27-inch iMac? I should mention I do not want a laptop. My current work laptop never leaves my desk at the church. Each week I edit in Code Services, do minor audio editing, sometimes After Effects work, photo editing, and a lot of stuff that could do on just about any other computer, i.e. web browsing, documents, typical office stuff. A lot of my day-to-day audio-video editing really taxes my current MacBook. That's an important sentence, obviously because it's 4 years old. Is the new Mac Pro at $26.99? I can get a 10% off through a business deal we have at Apple. Really worth the $1,000 more than the 27-inch iMac. Anyone out there using the new Mac Pro and loving it? I have a pretty good sized computer upgrade budget, but I still want to be a good steward and not buy something that has more power than I need. Any thoughts? Muchly appreciated. Thanks, you all. Okay. So, I think there's a couple of things in play here. First, you say you do a lot of audio and video editing. That's going to be better on a Mac Pro. You say you do After Effects, better on a Mac Pro. Now, if you do one video a week, you can render it, there's no problem. That might be different. But if you do a lot of this, I think I would look at the math, and on this post I actually did the math for the $1,000 difference between these two computers you were looking at. A lot of people were suggesting PCs, but he's specifically a Mac guy, so that's not a good answer, because he's going to lose a lot of time in trying to figure out the differences. So he needs to stick with what he knows if he wants to buy something for the sake of being more efficient with his time. So what I would recommend is do the math and figure out how much time do I need to save a week to justify this purchase, and see if the Mac Pro would do it. I will say that a friend of mine went to the Apple Store and he actually asked them how great it was and tell me why I should buy it, and the guy started up every single piece of software on the Mac Pro at once, and they all started in a single jump from the dock. So like this, bump, they're all up. In and of itself, that would save me a lot of time. Photoshop takes forever. It probably takes 5 minutes to load on my MacBook Pro. So for me, if I had the money, if I had the budget for it, this would be pretty obvious. So I think that's what I want you to consider is it really saving you $1,000, or are you spending the $1,000 in your time? And then, if you have it for 3-4 years, the amount of money per day, the amount of time per day you need to save becomes minuscule to account for that extra $1,000. So just think of it that way. Okay, next, homemade rear projection screen. Jeremy Carroll asks, I need a rear projection screen for VBS this year that is about 16 feet wide. This will only be a one-time need, so I'd prefer not to drop $2,000 to $3,000 on it. Any recommendations on a fairly inexpensive way to go about building my own screen? Material, do you think a seam is going to be that noticeable? Thanks for any advice, ladies and gents. Well, you could obviously rent one. That's probably a bet. If you're only going to use it for a week, that's probably a better plan than buying one. Thing one. Thing two, I've seen people make them out of Tyvek. Make them out of. I think that you could get a photographic muslin from Amazon fairly inexpensively that might work really well. You could take a big piece of material and paint it with screen goo. That would work. I think renting is probably your most cost-efficient option because you'll get a better quality screen, and it won't take your time in trying to figure out how to make it. So that's something that I'd really, really look into. Some people suggested spandex, perfectly an acceptable solution, but just do the math and figure out, if renting is the same price, I would rent it. And that way you don't have to store the thing when you're done or say, I don't know, do I want to throw it away? All that stuff. You just don't have to worry about, and it's going to be a better product. So, John Walsh says, NewTek, Blackmagic, design converter, panty projector weirdness. Hi, everyone. We've got a problem that's driving us nuts. Our Sanctuary IMAX system is composed of a NewTek TriCaster 450 that outputs over broadcast quality 3G coax to two Blackmagic Designs HD Link Pro DVI converter boxes, one for each projector. Then the DVI output of the Blackmagic box goes into DVI input of the Panasonic projector. The Panasonic projectors don't have SDI, so we have to use DVI. When they work, the images are stunningly good on our large screen, so good in fact that we have no compelling reason to consider going 1080. But all is not well. Here's the problem. Seemingly random appearances of horizontal lines that shimmer in the upper right part of the screen when we have really dark scenes via camera, or certain slides from our PowerPoint pre-service announcement slide rotation. The slides can be either blue or red or green, but only one of the three. The individual lines constantly vary in their length from that right border of the screen. Kind of looks like an audio RTA meter turned sideways. Very weird. Is there one surefire way to eliminate the lines? Turn up the brightness setting on the TC450's input control panel for that specific input. I'm not aware of a setting on the TC450's output side that is adjustable as to signal output strength. Did I miss something? Another symptom we're having is sometimes on PowerPoint slides with lots of white, the image sometimes fizzes and has shimmery quality to it. This fuzzes up the image a bit and is noticeable. It's kind of random. We've gone for 2 years since installation and have had occasional random occurrences where we get a little of this. For instance, on the camera input channel, when we set up the cams on the tripods early Sunday mornings before service, we don't have the stage lights turned up yet, so the scene is fairly dark. But when we turned on the stage light to normal, things are fine. Beautiful image on our 720p system. So the problem seems to relate to a video signal strength issue of some sort in the digital domain, not my area of expertise. But then why do the white PowerPoint slides shimmer? I spent hours setting levels when we installed these Blackmagic boxes, one on each of the two projectors, to get the threshold set just right. What a pain. Does this make sense to anyone? I'm tempted to rip out the Blackmagic converters and get AJA equivalents, but I can't say with 100% certainty that they're the problem, though I suspect them. Anyone have any ideas what I'm talking about? Okay, so you might be right, it might be signal, but it might be too much signal. Especially when you're talking the shimmery quality, sometimes too much video signal can cause that. But what I would do if I were you is I would simple down the system. And what I mean by that is I would make a bare minimum working system. So take an SDI signal, run that into the Blackmagic box, run out of the Blackmagic box with DVI into one projector. The way that he described this in some of the further posts is it jumps to the other projector after the first. No. You don't want to do that. You want just one and see if the problem remains. If the problem remains, see if you can swap out the parts. So swap out one projector for the other. Swap out the cable. Swap out the Blackmagic box. Swap out the source and see where the problem arises from. It could be that it's the TriCaster. It could be that it's the box. It could be it's the cables. It could be it's the projector. It could be how these all interact with each other, but you don't know any of that yet. So I would get to a bare minimum installation and swap out stuff until the problem goes away, if you can. If the problem goes away, then start adding things in and see where the problem shows back up. Oh, look, I can do one projector perfectly fine, but the second I add the second projector, that's where the problem is. Oh, okay, then you know where to look at the problem. If it's, oh, I have another SDI source and it works perfectly fine forever with this other SDI source, but not with the TriCaster, okay, it's something about the signal the TriCaster is sending out. Do you see what I'm saying? So you just need to swap out things until you figure it out. Now, one at a time, as much as is possible, so that we can figure this out. It might be the black magic boxes, or it could be that it's the cable run. It could be a bazillion things. As I say, it seems like it's almost like the cable run is a little too powerful, which I know seems counterintuitive, but that's just how it feels. So if that's if that helps you, I'm really excited about it, and I hope that just in general, when it comes to troubleshooting, that you consider you just need to do some basic steps to try and get the minimum system, try and get the shortest cable runs you can. A guy I used to work with would say, hey, short leash it and call me back. And what he meant by that was put it on short cables and see if the problem goes away. If the problem goes away on a short cable, it's either a problem with the long cable run or a problem with how the long cable is run. So a lot of times I would fix problems because, all things being equal, cables tend to go bad more quickly than pieces of gear. So that's what I would suggest for you. One other thing before we get going, it's almost a half an hour into this, and so I just wanted to remind you that this show is provided by generous people like you. So head on over to patreon.com/Paul Allen Cliff. That's patreon.com/PAULALANCLIF and help support the show. For as little as $1 a month, you can help bring just better quality to these shows, and hopefully soon we'll be able to get more and more experts in to talk about the areas of church tech. I really enjoy doing these shows, and I really enjoy answering your questions, so don't forget to head on over to trinitydigitalmedia.com/contact, and there you can leave me just a question, and I'll be happy to answer it. So until next time, go out and change eternity. This is Paul Allen Clifford with trinitydigitalmedia.com.